Hi folks, welcome back to MMA Rewind. I'm your host, Derek Pruitt. Today we're looking back at Vale Tudo Japan, 1994. Now, unlike the US, at this time, Japan actually did have a mixed martial arts organization. Shooto, who actually hosted the Vale Tudo Japan tournament, has been around since 1985 and is still around today, but they had relatively restrictive rules. So, Vale Tudo Japan was an attempt to go and let fighters fight under a more permissive rule set, similar to the early UFC. Now, there were some concessions because of the fact that it was being held in Japan, so they had to go and just work with the local officials there. So, the difference was that this would be 2 8-minute rounds. The fighters had to wear gloves, although they were fingerless so they could grapple. There was a 10 count for knockdowns. And in addition to the UFC rules of no biting, groin strikes, or eye gouges, they also outlawed elbows, headbutts, and spinal stomps, they said specifically. And just remember that last little bit, the elbows, headbutts, and spinal stomps. That'll become relevant later. So, let's go ahead and get into the action. After a relatively short intro package, we jump straight to the first fight, Bud Smith versus Chris Boss. Now, it's spelled like bass or bass, like the fish, but the announcer pronounced it Boss, and the fighter never said his name, so I'm going to go with the announcer and say Boss. Now, both are strikers, Smith a kickboxer and Boss a karateka. They circle around, trading leg kicks, before Smith knocks Boss down, and there's some confusion as the referee has to keep them off each other to try to get a 10 count in. After clearing everything up, the fight resumes, and Boss walks directly into a Smith right hand that lays him out flat. 10 seconds later, Smith is declared the winner at 54 seconds of round 1. For the short duration, this was actually a pretty entertaining fight. You could tell that both fighters actually knew what they were doing, but the 10 count rule was a giant mistake. For those wondering, though, Shooto would keep the 10 count rule, because that was part of their rule set, all the way until 2008. Now, as for Chris Boss, this was his only mixed martial arts fight. Now, I'm going to probably butcher this name because it was difficult for me to tell exactly how the announcer pronounced it. The next bout is Jan Lomolder versus Kenji Kamaguchi. Now, this is Lomolder's first mixed martial arts bout, while Kamaguchi's been fighting in Shooto since 1989. And at this point in his career has amassed a 10-0-4 record. Kamaguchi starts the bout with, I'm not sure if that's a double chop or a double ear box, but Lomolder blocks it, and Kamaguchi immediately transitions to a single leg takedown. Lomolder pops right back up and unloads a few punches before Kamaguchi again attempts a takedown. Lomolder makes a half-hearted attempt at a sloppy guillotine before Kamaguchi transitions to his back, but with no hooks in, Lomolder just stands up again. A pattern is starting to emerge here. Kamaguchi easily gets the takedown, but since Lomolder doesn't want to grapple, Kamaguchi doesn't seem to know how to keep him down. Kamaguchi attempts a standing straight armbar, putting his head through the ropes to try to help defend some of Lomolder's punches. This is pretty unsuccessful as Lomolder just unloads on the back of Kamaguchi's head. Eventually, Kamaguchi falls to the ring apron just outside the ropes, and Lomolder stomps his head a few times before the referee pulls him off in order to allow Kamaguchi to get back in the ring. Kamaguchi immediately shoots, and Lomolder strikes him with some illegal elbow strikes, but the referee didn't say anything. Kamaguchi gets him down, and Lomolder appears willing to grapple before they both tumble out of the ring. As an aside, I understand a lot of people like the aesthetic of the ring and how much easier it is to see inside of it compared to a cage. But the second bout in, and we can see the ring's just not really a good environment for mixed martial arts. When's the last time a UFC fighter fell out of the cage because they were thrown against it? As far as I know, that was UFC 3, which we'll cover in a video shortly in the future. Lomolder attempts to take Kamaguchi's head off before Kamaguchi hits yet another single leg takedown. To his credit, Lomolder keeps attempting guillotine chokes off these takedowns, he just doesn't know how to do it. Lomolder is back to his feet. Kamaguchi attempts a takedown and falls out of the ring. Again. Kamaguchi with another takedown attack, and Lomolder just starts to unload on him. The sequence finishes with an illegal elbow strike, a soccer kick, an illegal spinal stomp, and then 2 more soccer kicks. Look, Japan, I know you like to play fast and loose with the rules, but this is kind of ridiculous. Kamaguchi climbs back in the ring after about 30 seconds on the floor, and now they start counting. Kamaguchi enters the 10 count, but he just looks dead on his feet here. This fight should have been called when he couldn't climb back into the ring in a timely fashion. Japan has a history of leniency to the hometown favorites, but this was just painful to watch. They clinch up and Lombardor delivers an absolutely thunderous knee directly to Kamaguchi's face. Kamaguchi attempts a leg lock while Lombardor stomps and kicks his head before landing some devastating punches. Once Kamaguchi relinquishes the leg lock, Lombardor unloads with an absolutely vicious soccer kick, and the referee finally waves it off. This fight epitomizes everything that, in hindsight, was wrong with Japanese MMA in the 90s and early 2000s. From the ring to the favoritism for the local fighter, even when it's to their own detriment. This fight went on for way too long just because Kamaguchi was Japanese, and it probably caused him permanent issues the rest of his career. Now, Kamaguchi would continue fighting MMA, including participating in future Vale Tudo Japan events, with retirements in 1999 and 2006 until he finally permanently retired in 2015, ending his career with a record of 14 wins, 7 losses, and 4 draws. Coming up next is Gerard Gordeau protege David Levicki versus Shooto veteran Kazuhiro Kusayanagi. Now this is Levicki's second MMA fight, coming up short at UFC 2, while Kusayanagi comes in with a 6-9-1 record. The fight starts with an intense staring contest. Seriously, there are some feints, but nobody actually tries to throw a strike for a full 55 seconds. Finally, they engage, and Kusayanagi tries a few half-hearted strikes before shooting in, and Levicki just punches him straight into oblivion. There's a perfunctory 10 count. Levicki is the winner in 1 minute and 20 seconds of round 1. Now, Kusayanagi would continue his MMA career before retiring in 2008 with a 9-17-3 record. Next up is what everybody came to see, both at home and in the arena. Rickson Gracie fighting Yoshinori Nishi. Nishi comes in with some experience, 3 wins and no losses, but that's all from a tournament he won just earlier that year. Rickson, of course, comes in on a 400-fight win streak. The fight begins. Rickson immediately clinches into an outside trip to half guard. Nishi locks down Rickson's foot, and the pace slows as Rickson begins slowly trying to work his way free with punches to the body and pressure on Nishi's knee. Nishi tries to explode out of his predicament, but Rickson just jumps the full mount before Nishi turns and gives his back. Rickson stays locked on before punishing Nishi with body and head punches before sinking in the choke and ending Nishi's night. Now, Nishi would fight sporadically over the next decade, ending his career with a 4-3-1 record in 2003. A brief segment explains that Lombardor broke his hand, and so Bud Smith gets a bye to the finals. This means the next fight is Rickson back in the ring versus David Levicki. They announce that Levicki is fighting again, although he apparently also broke his hand in his first bout. Also noteworthy, they announce Rickson as, quote, the bravest man in the world. Look, it was the 90s. Rickson with 2 stomp kicks before Levicki lands a nice pair of right hands. Rickson doesn't like that, clinches, and they fall out of the ring. Levicki landing on Rickson. That couldn't feel good, although it is Levicki who takes a minute to get back in the ring. Rickson with some leg kicks and a few stomps to Levicki's knee before working his way in with a jab. Levicki apparently too afraid of getting taken down to commit to any punches. Rickson steps in and clinches before tripping Levicki and ground and pounding him. Levicki looks absolutely helpless before tapping out to punches, but even though he tapped out, they still give him a 10 count. Levicki actually fights in one more MMA event before retiring with a 1-3 record. The finals are up next, Rickson Gracie against Bud Smith. Smith tries a teep, which Rickson catches and takes Smith down. Rickson immediately advances the mount, punches Smith a few times in the ribs to free his head, and then proceeds to surgically dismantle Smith with punches on the ground until Smith taps out at 39 seconds of round 1. Smith would actually fight in one more tournament 2 years later, again going 1-1 before calling it quits with a 2-2 record. Rickson, though, would go on to fight in next year's Vale Tudo Japan 1995 and continue fighting until retiring after his eldest son's death in 2001. There is a brief ceremony where trophies are awarded to first, second, and third places, and the event ends with a press scrum and the Gracies celebrating the tournament wins. Technically, there are a couple of Shooto fights included in the recording of this event, but I'm not going to cover those this week. I might make those like extras in the future. If you guys just stay tuned, maybe I'll make them shorts or something. And that's it for Vale Tudo Japan 1994. If you enjoyed this video, I suggest you like and subscribe so you know whenever I upload new retrospectives. Also, if you have an event you'd like me to cover, comment below, let me know. Next week we'll go 40 year to see Vale Tudo Japan 1995 and the infamous Gerard Gordeau incident. That you do not want to miss. Alright everyone, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.